Don't stop driving late at night. It all started late last night. About once a month, I visit my parents for the weekend, who live about 4 hours away from me. It is a quiet, peaceful drive through remote rural roads, so I don't mind how often I drive them. Last night, the drive was like many others, with the only exception being that I left later than usual. It was dark for the majority of the drive, and I didn't return home until almost midnight. That being said, it was a nice drive, although I could see lightning flashing in the distance from a far-off storm that I seemed to be following. About 2 hours in, on the most remote section, I thought I saw something in the distance. I am always afraid of deer or moose, so I tend to slow right down at the slightest sign of life. As I approached, I was shocked to see what appeared to be a person lying on the side of the road. I slammed the car to a stop and ran out to see if they were all right. As I drew close, I could clearly see it was a girl who appeared to be in her 20s, with dark black hair and torn, muddied clothing. I called out to her, "Are you okay?" There was no answer or sign of movement. I quickly crouched down and put my fingers to her neck, as I had seen on TV, trying to check for some signs of vitals. Nothing. I grabbed her wrists, trying for a different pulse, and was shocked at how cold her skin felt. With a sinking feeling, I knew I was too late. Her face was turned away at an odd angle, and so I gently reached out and turned it towards me, and knew for sure she was gone as soon as I saw her eyes. They stared back at me, unblinking. For a moment, it appeared as though a flash of sentience still shone in them, but it quickly faded, leaving dull, glassy eyes staring at me through the darkness. I reached for my phone, ready to dial 911. I briefly hesitated. Do I still call 911 when the person is already dead? Do I call the local police phone number instead? Technically, it's not an emergency anymore. Shaking my head at myself, I dialed 911. Police? Fire? Or ambulance? The reassuring voice said on the other end. Police? Or ambulance? I'm not sure. What is the emergency? She inquired. Well, I was out driving, and there is a girl at the side of the road, but I think she's already dead. She has no pulse, her skin is cold, and she is unresponsive. I spoke quickly, almost stumbling over my words, as I was understandably feeling a little unnerved. I quickly gave the operator my location and pertinent details. Police and ambulance are on their way. Are there any signs of injury on her? The woman asked. I quickly checked. No, she is only muddy, and her clothing is torn, I replied. It took me aback, as I hadn't realized until that moment how strange it was that a girl should be out here in the middle of nowhere, dead with no signs of injury. As I looked around at the darkness, I began to feel nervous and decided to wait in my car, still speaking with the operator. The police showed up fairly quickly, and the officers asked me a few short questions before I was allowed to continue on my journey. As I continued driving, I tried to shake off the events of the night, but as I was driving through darkness with no means to distract myself, I understandably found it hard to forget. I finally arrived home, ready to go straight to bed. A little embarrassed, I left the hallway light on outside my door. It may seem silly, but it was my first experience even seeing a dead body, and I was feeling a little creeped out. Normally my roommates would help me feel secure, but both were gone at the moment, and the apartment felt strange and empty without them. I fell asleep fairly quickly, but suddenly woke up around 2:30 a.m. It took me a second to realize why everything felt wrong. The hallway light, which I had purposefully left on to shine some light in the room, was out. As I realized this, I felt a chill take over my body as I lay in the darkness, waiting for my eyes to adjust. Slowly, I began to see shapes in the darkness and reassured myself that everything was okay. I saw my desk take shape and my dresser. My yoga mat rolled into a ball gave me a fright until I realized what it was. However, I slowly came to realize that there was one shape I couldn't place. In the middle of the room was a dark, humped shape taking up the center of the floor. I racked my brain as my body froze in fear and my heart pounded, trying to think what it was I could have left there. It was only as I saw two glimmers in it that I realized it was exactly the shape of the girl last night, in the curled up position she had been left in on the side of the road, and the glimmers were exactly where her eyes would have been. Please do not stare into the eyes of your reflection in the mirror. You know that experiment where you stare into the mirror at your own eyes and hold the gaze until you start seeing your face go all weird. If you haven't, please do not try it out. I am begging and warning you. I repeat, do not try it. I hope by the end of reading this, I have convinced you as to why you should not try this. I loved doing weird experiments that gave me a warped version of reality, something to break the monotony of life, you know? As a 22-year-old that just got stuck into a 9-to-5 job, I desperately tried to change things up. I didn't want to do drugs, so I tried experiments like the above. When I first read about this mirror experiment, I thought it was absolutely amazing. It was so cool to see things change right before your eyes. I remember one particular time when my face got so warped it no longer looked like me. Heck, it didn't even look human. I was absolutely thrilled. So I tried doing this experiment under different lights, like a bright light, red light, dim light, and lastly the candlelight, just to see the effects of each light. You don't realize how just one single action could completely turn your life around. Like not being able to answer questions on titration in chemistry made me get a C for that course, and as a result, I could not get into medical science, which changed my degree completely, and as a result, my job. My life could have been totally different had I gotten into medical school. Anyways, the point is, it's always the smallest of things that can have a major impact, and for me, it was 3 simple lit candles. So one day, I decided to try out the experiment in candlelight. Oddly, this time I felt scared. Don't ignore your gut feeling. It is honestly like a second brain. In fact, I think studies have proved it. Google it or something. So I felt quite odd but decided to go ahead anyways. I lit up 3 candles, enough to illuminate just my face. I started the experiment as usual and stared into my eyes. 20 seconds had passed, and instead of my face changing, as usual, it remained the same. I decided to continue for longer, despite the itching sensation of unease. Then my face started changing, slowly and clearly. My eyes came too close to each other. They had become red. I didn't realize I had been smiling, but I could see myself smiling widely. It was one of those smiles where you can see the gums on your teeth. They looked so red. I got freaked out and closed my eyes. When I opened, just for a split second, I saw that warped image of myself again. I thought it must have been one of those images that are sort of retained in your memory and play out afterward. Like when you see negative images on your computer screen, and then when you see a white wall, you see the image. I brushed it off and did not see myself in the mirror the whole day. That night, I decided to brush my hair in front of my mirror, and I swear for a second I saw my warped version standing behind me with that same smile. I quickly turned around, almost screaming, but didn't see anything, thankfully. After that, I didn't see anything odd for a while. I did stop with the stupid experiment. Then after a while, at my friend's house, I saw it. I saw it while I was drying some silver pots, and I saw my own face, sort of blurred out. But then, I also saw that odd, warped image of myself. I almost dropped my pot. From then on, my warped image made a daily appearance on any reflective surface. Windows at work, puddles on the street, bathroom mirror, laptop reflection. If it reflected an image, my warped image made an appearance. If you are wondering how I kept my sanity, well, to be honest, I don't know. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror and got rid of all reflective things in my house and tried to stay away from reflective things. I got my best friend to come stay with me, telling her I was just feeling lonely. My parents are in another country, so sadly could not flee into their protective arms. Never did I think something I was so familiar with, like my face, myself, would scare me. Every time I look at my hands or body, I looked at it for just a second longer, just to make sure I know it's me. You know the phrase, I know it like it's the back of my hand. That's pretty stupid, because until this time, I had not paid much attention to the back of my hand. And now every time I do, I question if it's the same hands I saw the last time. Anyways, I digress. I needed to share this information with a person, someone who is smart and could comfort me. Though not very religious, I always enjoyed going to temples as I am a Hindu. I found it calming and safe. I had become quite close with the priest there over the years, and he would always tell me wonderful practical stories about life and other important lessons. So I decided I would tell him of my odd experience. I met him on a Tuesday night. Usually, Tuesdays are the quietest, so I thought it would be a good idea. After the usual routine of praying, etc., I asked if I could share with him something. He was more than happy to listen. For someone who is always calm, I did not expect his reaction. The minute I told him about the reflection, his face looked extremely worried, and he abruptly looked away from me. Once I finished telling him the story, he took the golden jug of holy water and literally emptied it on me right then and there. Usually, priests give a drop of that water with a little golden spoon, not empty the entire contents of water onto you. Before I could say anything, he went and handed me a lemon without looking at me again, along with some other herbs, and told me to take them with me. He told me to stay away from reflections and told me to come back next week. When I tried to talk, he's still not looking at me, told me to leave and come back next week. You can imagine how scary that must have been. A priest freaking out? That fucked me up. So guys, here I am, writing this down in the hopes that someone else has had a similar experience and or could provide some help or some sort of comfort. And I could really use the help, because my warped image that used to appear in reflections, I saw it yesterday at work, not on a reflection, but standing near my colleague's desk. I experienced strange things while pet sitting for my grandparents. Now, I'm worried that I've seen too much for my own good. Have you ever known someone your whole life, and then something happens that makes you completely reevaluate your relationship with that person? What if that person was a relative? What if they were involved with something that would usually constitute calling the police? Would you call the police? Should I? A little over a week ago, my grandparents were going out of town. They were going to be gone for a week and offered to pay me to pet sit their dog. All I had to do was walk the dog down the road, feed her, and clean up after her. The pet sitting fit into my work schedule, so I was happy to take care of their dog. Plus, they were my grandparents after all. It was the least I could do. The first day went about as expected. I used a set of spare keys to enter through the side of the house. The inside of the house was really cold. It was so cold, I worried the air conditioning unit might stop working. So I changed the thermostat back to a comfortable room temperature. I'm not sure the exact breed of my grandparents' dog, but she's a tiny, brown dog named Johnny. Taking care of her was easy. She wasn't very messy, didn't eat large portions of food, and only walked a little before getting tired. Even if she were difficult, it's like I said, I wouldn't have minded helping out my grandparents. I finished up my first day by making sure the garage door was open so my grandparents' cats could come in at night. I had no instructions for the cats because, they're cats. They take care of themselves better than I could probably. In total, I wasn't there for more than 30 minutes, and I figured the rest of the week would go the exact same. On day 2, I returned to the house, and it was freezing cold again. The thermostat had been set really low again, and I assumed it was some sort of auto feature. However, I couldn't shake the idea that someone had reset it themselves. I blamed this on the fact that when my cousins would come over to my grandparents' house when we were younger, we all tried to spook each other with scary stories. I was probably just reaping those stories which I had sown. That was until I saw that the garage door was closed. I was confident I hadn't closed it. I was starting to get not necessarily freaked out, but I felt tense, like I was anticipating someone to jump out at me. I finished up my tasks, especially enjoying my time walking Johnny outside of the house. I opened the garage door again and changed the thermostat again. I have to admit that at this point, I was curious to see if it would change. After this, I quickly left. As I left, although I didn't want to admit it, I knew I had seen Johnny staring at the basement door. The third day nearly did it for me. Like I had feared, both the thermostat had been changed and the garage door was closed. Honestly though, at the time it felt like this validated both of my theories I was using to cope. It was possible that these were just automated changes done every day at a certain time. And what were the actual chances of someone being in the house? I once again did what I needed to and finished by walking Johnny. When we returned home, we hadn't even gotten all the way in through the side door when I saw something that made me turn around and leave, taking Johnny with me. The basement door was wide open. I didn't see anything else besides the open door, but I'd seen enough movies to know that I shouldn't investigate it. I actually took Johnny home with me and just kept her overnight. I told my parents what had happened, and they said that I should text my grandparents to see what they wanted me to do. I thought this was a sort of odd answer. I wanted to know if they thought I should call the police, but they insisted on texting them. I ended up texting my grandmother. I'll copy our exact conversation. "Hey, Nana, I went over to take care of Johnny today, and when I got back from walking her, your basement door was open, and I hadn't opened it. The house seemed to be in perfect condition, but I'm wondering if someone broke in. What would you like for me to do? Should I call the police? My parents told me you would know what to do. Thanks, and sorry for bothering. Love you." It was a pretty typical message. This was her reply. "Hi, my name? Do not worry, the lock is broken. The draft pushes open sometimes. Do not call the police. We are having a good time on our trip. We love you." Her response was somewhat uncanny to me, but I just attributed that to how old people text. Our older messages weren't really any different. I responded, "Okay, I was just checking. I'm glad you two are having a good trip." Her message, "Do not call the police. We love you." On the fourth day, my fears were not quenched. I took Johnny back over to their house, but this time, I brought my younger brother with me. We are both big guys, so I felt some reassurance with him tagging along. I showed my brother the basement door. It was still open. This comforted me, because maybe the door's lock really was broken. The basement also did have strangely great airflow. My brother insisted we look through the basement, but I told him no way. He said he was going to go whether or not I went with him, and this got me. I was still convinced someone might have been in the house, so I didn't want him to be down there alone. He descended the stairs. I turned the lights on, revealing a basement that looked normal as ever. I had a pocket knife on me, so I wasn't completely ill-prepared for a possible confrontation. Knowing my brother, he probably had one on him too. Johnny never left our side. She actually took off down the steps after my brother. When my brother got to the bottom of the staircase, I checked the basement door. There was a lock, and after warning my brother, I closed the door and checked the lock. It worked perfectly. I opened the basement door again and started going down the stairs. It was too weird that my grandmother had presumably lied to me. I needed to get my brother out of the house. I could just feel it. I made my way down the steps and saw my brother fiddling with a second locked door. It was small, probably for storage, or so I was hoping. As he messed with the lock, Johnny started barking at it wildly. "Don't open that, dude. Let's go." The door, although small, had multiple locks on it. Something felt horribly wrong. As kids, this specific door had been the center of many of our scary stories, and always for good reason. Something was mysterious about the door, and we had caught on to it even as children. My brother had undone some of the locks, but there was one that required a key. Johnny was still barking furiously at the door. Her barks almost had me interested in what was behind it, but not fully. I heard my brother exclaim subtlety, and I saw him walking to the door. As he passed me, he jangled a single key in triumph. I just stood there. I wanted to see what was on the other side. The door opened without a sound. As soon as it did, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. I couldn't take my eyes off the now open door. The room, to our surprise, opened up into a large space. We found a light switch and flipped it. The walls of the room were just exposed earth and rock like a cave. The room looked like it had been carved out, though. The rock walls were uniform all the way around the room, forming a dome shape. Water ran down the walls and the air smelled of organic waste. The centerpiece of the room was a hole about the size of a manhole. It clearly wasn't one, as it consisted of the same material as the walls. My brother and I approached it cautiously. Johnny had stopped barking and hadn't entered the room. The light overhead illuminated the hole, but we couldn't see the bottom. A horrible stench rose out of the hole. My brother let out a hello down the hole. I tapped his shoulder and mouthed, "Let's get the hell out of here." We began to turn when a noise arose from the hole. It wasn't one noise. It was multiple. They were clearly human screams. It sounded as if dozens of people were in the hole, and the voices sounded like they had traveled up the hole for miles. The screams were so desperate, so stricken with agony. I'd never heard anything like it, and I'd bet I never will again. Instantly, tears were brought to my eyes. The cries of those people were that painful. We didn't even make an effort to cover our tracks. My brother and I went home without speaking a word. By the time our mom got home that night, we had calmed down enough to tell her what we'd seen. All she had to say was, "Don't call the police, and make sure your grandparents don't find out you went down there." That night, I was plagued with those animalistic, but so discernibly human screams. It was like the voices had been pleading with us in a futile attempt to get them out of that hole. I can't remember if I even ever slept. I still have trouble sleeping now, days later. My parents told me they'd take care of Johnny for the rest of the week, and I think they tried to cover for me and my brother. I don't know if it worked though, because today, my mom told me and my brother that our grandparents wanted us to come over and talk. Her voice was trembling, even though she was trying to hide it. My grandparents want us to come over tomorrow. My brother and I are freaked out and don't plan on going if we can help it. What the hell are we supposed to do? I mean, they're just our grandparents. They won't hurt us, will they? A memory I have from the first day of taking care of Johnny has been on the forefront of my mind. I was walking Johnny down the street to a park when a neighbor stopped me. She was an elderly woman, squinting at me from her mailbox, holding up a hand to block out the sunlight. She asked me, "How's it eating?" "Johnny? Oh, she's eating well, I think," I answered awkwardly. "Oh, you're not your grandfather, yes?" She must have assumed I was my grandfather because of the sunlight. "Oh no," I laughed. She just turned around and walked towards her house slowly. I heard her mumble under her breath, "Oh, never mind then."